Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining the Bytes event and the Zscaler session on 5 ways to improve your users' Office 365 at-home experience. My name is Dan Shelton. I'm head of transformation strategy with Zscaler. I've been with the company for a little bit over 2 years, but prior to joining, I was a customer. I used Zscaler and Office 365 to drive a large-scale transformation program across a Fortune 500 global staffing company headquartered out of Detroit. They had offices in 900 locations spread across 22 countries, and they had a very mobile workforce already, but the business was really looking to move to a formal workforce enablement program and leverage the collaboration tools that come as part of Office 365 to drive that. So today I'm going to talk about what that journey looked like, and of course the 5 ways to improve the user's Office 365 at-home experience. But before we get started, just a little bit of housekeeping. Remember, if you guys have questions at any part throughout the presentation, just use that little chat, the IM stream to the right to submit the questions. And we've saved about 5 or 10 minutes at the end to be able to answer them. So we look forward to the kind of interactive session at the end. But with that said, let's jump into it. So with the agenda, again, we're going to touch on 3 things today. One is the guidance from Microsoft on how to best connect users to the platform. And then also a couple trends that we're seeing within Zscaler, connecting our 2,000 plus customers that we have that are aggressively using Office 365, and they're sending all that traffic through the Zscaler data centers. We have some interesting insights there. I'll share with you the lessons learned from my transformation journey at my previous employer that really was driven by the requirement to deploy every app within the Office 365 business or platform across the business. It spanned, again, 900 locations, 22 countries, thousands of users. But then more importantly, at the end, we'll kind of double click on how organizations can leverage Zscaler to connect their users to Office 365, and more importantly, leverage that investment in the licensing that you made. See, I talk to so many customers now that have moved from E3 models into E5 models with Microsoft, and they're still struggling pushing out all the apps. You made the investment, you want to use them. Let's talk about how. So in terms of kind of the setting the stage for the challenge, I mean, cloud and mobility, powerful enablers of transformation, right? I mean, thank God, because you talk about the perimeter has vanished. The internet is the new network. Cloud is the new data center. We're in this model where a majority of our users are working from home anyways. And this premise of having all these security capabilities, having all of these policy enforcement tools sitting in your data centers or sitting in places where you're forcing user traffic to come back into, that worked when all of your users were on the network and all of your apps were in the data center. But in this mesh that we have now, and our users almost everywhere and most of them remote, how do you do that? How do you provide the best access without circumventing security policy? And that's essentially what Zscaler does. Connecting users, regardless of what device or what network they're on, to their apps, whether it's Office 365, whether they're private apps within your data center. But essentially what it is we're trying to just make the internet a safe place to do business. Internet's the new network, cloud's the new data center. We do it in a way where you don't circumvent the security policy. So let's dive into Microsoft now. The reason we're here, right? Office 365, connecting users to it. So Microsoft, they have 4 general statements in terms of connecting users to that platform. The first is the ability to identify and differentiate traffic. Different Office 365 apps, Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, they all have different requirements. They need you to be able to apply different policies to those different traffic streams on your network. Okay, great. Now your users are at home. How do you do that? But this is something they also say, egress your network connections locally, right? So don't backhaul traffic into, like, let's call them centralized data centers in regions. When I was a customer, we had 5 global data centers. Yeah, it made sense. 2 in EMEA, 2 North America, we had 6 and a couple in Asia. Actually, Microsoft's telling you not to do that because they want you to put your users as close to the internet as possible. It's all lowest latency. Being able to connect to the platform, to their front door of their service, as soon as possible. Obsess bypassing proxies. This is huge. Not only does your proxy live probably in your data center, so you got to backhaul everything to it, but now you're also talking about sending all of those sessions that didn't exist from a traffic flow perspective to the internet, because all those tools were sitting in your data center. Now you're putting them into the proxies, and we'll talk a little bit later about the impact that has. But it's not just latency, but it kills the app performance. From additional authentication, SSL inspection, things like that. So Microsoft is telling their users not to do this. And then lastly, it's the perspective of avoiding network hairpins. This is huge. This, I think, is the most relevant piece of guidance from Microsoft right now, because all of our users are remote. And if you want to enforce policies, you're either doing one thing, you're sending all the traffic back into your VPN concentrators, or you're managing this kind of split tunneling environment, which then you're circumventing your security policies. But they say, send your remote users directly to Microsoft and avoid having kind of centralized DNS. We'll talk about what that actually means from an impact perspective. But again, you do all these things, and now you're talking about potentially circumventing your security policies, and that's something that your security teams don't want. They want visibility into who's doing what, where, why, and when it's happening. So the key takeaway from Microsoft's guidance, look, focus on distributed internet versus centralized, right? It's specifically in their TechNet blog, it calls out to scale out, scale your internet presence out, have it be distributed, not up. So don't build bigger data center infrastructure to send traffic back through, have more internet connections. So think about remote user perspective, send that traffic direct. So this is a trend that we see within Zscaler, and this graph, it's over the last 5 years what the growth of Office 365 has been through Zscaler. Interesting, because it takes up more than a quarter of all of the traffic that goes through the Zscaler cloud. So we have more than 5,000 customers. We have 2,000 customers leveraging us, sending us more than a terabyte a month of traffic into Microsoft. But essentially it equates to about a quarter of all of the traffic through our cloud. Give you a frame of reference, our cloud on any given day, any given second, is over a terabit per second of bandwidth across the aggregate 150 data centers that we have across the world. Interesting perspective. So that's 100 or 1 terabit of traffic per second. Then 25% of that is Office 365. So we see the trends, we see the traffic growing, we see users and companies aggressively adopting the technology. Just that what's slowing them up is, again, following this guidance. And then if you don't follow the guidance, you have an inconsistent user experience, and I could speak firsthand to that. So now really going to jump into how I was able to have a consistent at-home experience for all of the users. So first thing, internet breakouts, every location for all your users, for all your apps, regardless if you're at home, you're in a Starbucks, you're in your office, it doesn't matter. Closest internet connection, go out. Don't send anything back through those data centers. But most importantly, all apps. Send Teams the same way that you send SharePoint and OneDrive and Exchange. Even though Teams, you're talking about UDP traffic. We'll touch later on different ports and protocols. But all traffic the same direction. It's internet bound. Don't send some back into the data center and some back and some direct out. Don't use pack files or different things. Say, hey, only 80 and 443 go this way. Send it all. Now, one of the lessons learned around this, and this is, again, distributing your internet out as opposed to up in your data center, dude, I talked about this before, the increased load on the security devices that you have in your data center from Microsoft, or when you move to Microsoft and send that traffic. We saw between 70, up to 70 connections. If you had every single app running, Teams, Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, 70 concurrent sessions going out through that security infrastructure. Again, that was not meant to support that level of traffic flow, because those are not just, hey, go download the file, shut off the session. There's again, up to 70 of them at any given time, and they're long-lived sessions that completely exhaust the ports on these security devices. So be careful of that. The other key point, support all protocols, all ports with kind of the cloud firewall perspective. You think your users off the network, You want to send that Teams traffic. You don't want to just send it direct, because you have a requirement to enforce that security policy, and you want visibility into that traffic. But be able to have policies and send traffic all the same direction. The HTTPS traffic for Exchange Online, UDP traffic for Teams. Hey, that's great, you want to allow that, but I don't want to allow UDP traffic for anything else other than the destination of Microsoft and UDP, because then you can run things like BitTorrent. So having the ability to have that kind of policy that you would have from a firewall that was sitting at your premise, take that next-gen firewall up to layer 7 rule sets and apply it in the cloud. This is absolutely critical. So then it's always the same, all ports, protocols, everything, all the visibility, policy enforcement, it's all consistent for your remote users. The last piece of it, this was huge. So if you think about the forwarding profiles on your VPNs, 700 lines of all the different Microsoft URLs and the IPs and all the different things that we had on perimeter devices and the forwarding profiles. Take that away and just say, look, make Zscaler the first hop out for all the internet traffic, and let Zscaler handle it. That's actually something that Zscaler does. So we help customers by reducing that burden, because we have a one-click feature. Lots of vendors say they have one-click feature, but we work with Microsoft, part of their network partner program. We're actually the only security vendor on that program right now that just says, you say, look, I'm a Microsoft customer, all of that traffic grooming, all the correct forwarding, all that profile just follows your users. All that those applications, we have fingerprints for them. You don't have to keep up on URLs, IP changes, anything that from an SSL inspection perspective, all of those things happen automatically. So you could significantly reduce the burden for your IT administration and then deliver that experience to your users. So if Microsoft does change something, you don't have to worry about it. You do not have to go in and, well, they changed something yesterday, so now my IT admins have to go in and change things in the VPN forwarding profiles or within the data center infrastructure. The fourth takeaway here is leverage a local and optimized DNS infrastructure. This map, it's got the West Coast of the United States on it. You can imagine this same problem regardless of where you're at. But if you had a common, let's say, call it DNS infrastructure in your data center, and I learned this and I put this together, this is something that was very specific to my business, is we had, Equinix data centers with Infoblox DNS sitting in Atlanta. And if you were thinking about the traffic flow from somebody out on the West Coast of the United States, it goes over relatively low latency into Atlanta, resolves Microsoft out of Atlanta. But my user is on the West Coast. This could apply for London. This applies for Amsterdam, for Frankfurt, for Paris. It doesn't matter. Your user is somewhere else from where your DNS service is. And you might not necessarily want to use just whoever the local DNS provider is. You might not trust that. But what Zscaler does is we help you, and again, following Microsoft's guidance, you set up first hop out to the internet is Zscaler, regardless of how you resolve that domain name. And then if we know that traffic's going to Microsoft, we're going to send it to the closest Microsoft data center. We sit in the same physical locations. Our infrastructure sits in those same locations. We're going to fix this problem for you and make sure that, again, it's optimal path routing, optimal DNS for your users. But this is something that a lot of organizations kind of skip over. It is part of Microsoft's guidance, and we do see this creating issues because, again, here, the user's really close to a Microsoft data center, but they're resolving Microsoft services out of a data center that's hundreds of kilometers away. And then lastly, the number 5 piece here, this was huge, but the ability to validate deployment assumptions with actionable data. Who's doing what in Office 365? You have the Office 365 UI, and you also have the ability with Zscaler to see who's doing what by location, by user groups, by different metrics that you have around, again, just validating the deployment assumptions. And people could say that you could use the native Office 365 tools, and then you quantify that end user experience, and more importantly, verify the security posture with the data that you see from Zscaler. But let's talk about end user experience a little bit more. Part of the Zscaler platform is this tool called Digital Experience. And it's where we sit in this kind of zero trust exchange, this cloud up on the left-hand side. Zscaler, first hop out to the internet for your users, last hop back in. We see that traffic from the endpoint going to the data center. Within our data center, we see it leave our data center and go to the service provider. We have many areas on the path of that traffic flow that we can provide your IT teams prescriptive troubleshooting information from. We can also give you, by groups of users, what that experience looks like on a daily basis, and reporting, and more importantly, historical. So when your CIO or CEO calls and says, hey, look, Office 365 wasn't working from home last Thursday, you have the ability to go up and look, this user had this device, tried to connect, this was the strength of the Wi-Fi, this was how much compute was being used on the local device, this was how long it took to get to the Zscaler data center, process within Zscaler, how long it took Microsoft to respond. So again, it's actionable data, but this is something, again, you need that data to validate those deployment assumptions, because your users aren't on the network, and all your monitoring tools and all of those application performance monitoring tools, they were all meant when your users are on the network and your apps are in the data center. So this was absolutely critical to quantifying that user experience. Another lesson learned is when your users are back in the office, but you have the ability to prioritize Office 365 bandwidth, reserve at least 40% of it. That's what I learned firsthand. You have to be able to provide that much. That's what your traffic flow is going to be minimum if you start using all the tools, but then cap it at 50. And the reason you cap it at 50, OneDrive. OneDrive client syncs, you can control in the UI how much upload or download you want that client to be able to enable. But what you cannot control in the UI is how many people are using it at the same time at a given location. This one's not as relevant for users working from home, but again, it's something that you can keep in mind. And with the Zscaler platform, you have the ability to do that. So let's now talk about kind of recap. So with Zscaler for Office 365, again, just send all your traffic out to the closest Zscaler data center. We have 150 of them. They're in the same physical locations Microsoft has their presence. All of these capabilities that we're talking about here, and we'll build out the slide on the right, they're all delivered bare metal compute in these 150 data centers. None of these policies are delivered on agents on your device. You need an agent on the device. It's going to authenticate your user and send traffic that's destined to the internet to the closest Zscaler data center. But all these policies are going to be enforced in the Zscaler data center. But you just send traffic destined to the internet to Zscaler, and then Zscaler handles that optimal path routing to Microsoft. You do it direct. You follow their guidance, supports all ports and protocols, easily deployed. There's not hardware needed. The one-click configuration, it takes your forwarding profile on your VPNs from hundreds of lines to literally just say anything to the internet to Zscaler. And you can optimize that connectivity with next-gen cloud firewall, things like bandwidth control. And again, with Zscaler, we are the only security vendor in that network partner program that Microsoft has, because we work with them exclusively to build this partnership and make sure, again, your users connecting is fully compliant through the Zscaler infrastructure. So some key integrations. So it's, Office 365 is a huge part, but we have API integrations with Azure Active Directory, Intune or their MEM platform, Azure Information Protection, Azure Sentinel. I mean, Zscaler essentially becomes the anchor. Again, first hop out to the internet, last hop back in before that traffic hits your users to connect your users to Office 365 or anything in Azure. And this is where that partnership is really fruitful, because it allows you to use cloud as the data center, internet as your network, and you do it without circumventing security policies. So guys, I talked a lot. Next steps, please submit the questions in the IM stream and we'll start answering real time. But thank you very much for joining this session, and please ask questions and engage the local account team. Thank you.